Regardless of who you are and where you are today in America, one thing is true. We are living in a profound moment of opportunity. It is also true that this is not the first time that we've faced a moment like this. We've been offered throughout our history many profound opportunities to demonstrate and to make real the words of humanity and community that exist in our founding documents. But too often, we have failed to capitalize on those moments. These are the moments when the things that are unfolding before our eyes in our communities and in our nation and our world seem so egregious and beyond the pale that everything deep inside of us screams for us to do something, to reimagine our world and our communities, and to make them what they can be and what they ought to be. In this moment today, our nation is filled with inequality of income, housing, education, race, and gender. In this moment today, our nation is filled with a lack of equity in social justice, a lack of equity in the way that different communities are impacted by law enforcement and the criminal justice system, and a lack of equity in the access to a globally competitive education made available to all of our children. But even in the face of these challenges, we're standing in a moment of opportunity for us to do great good, a moment of opportunity for us to make change, a moment of opportunity for us to create a better society, a better nation for ourselves and our children. The opportunity for change is here and now, and it is within our grasp. We only need to have the courage to seize it and to join together to chart our nation's path forward. As I speak to you today, I want you to understand what is happening to our children in communities and zip codes all across the United States of America. I want you to understand what is happening to our children even though we are still the richest and most prosperous nation in all of history. And as we like to tell ourselves, America is recognized as one of the most forward-thinking and generous nations to ever exist. Yet, every morning in the United States of America, more than 5 million children wake up in homes where their families are living in a condition of extreme income insufficiency. This means that a family of 4 is trying to exist off $36 a day. That's $9 per day per family member. Every morning in the United States of America, nearly 424,000 children wake up in a foster care bed as opposed to a bed in their own home. On average, every 24 hours across America, approximately 1,800 children are confirmed as victims of child abuse neglect. And nearly 700 children are removed from their families and placed in foster care. On average, every 24 hours across America, we lose 39 young people under the age of 25 to violence. Approximately 15 young people under the age of 25 die from homicide every 24 hours. Approximately 5 children die from child abuse neglect every 24 hours. Most of them haven't even yet reached their 6th birthday. And approximately 19 children, young people under the age of 25, die from suicide, making the statement that death is a better option to them than to live one more day of life as they know it. Against this backdrop, each day, I hear the voices of so many of our children crying out to us saying, "No one cares about me." They're saying, "I'm out here in these streets, and these streets have taught me to believe that no one really cares about me." Our children are crying out for a lifeline. They are crying out for a chance to dream. They need a reason to hope. And as our children cry, we must ask ourselves, what are we willing to do in this moment of opportunity for change? Are we willing to move beyond focusing on symptoms and being satisfied that we tried, but ultimately concluding that it was too hard to save somebody else's children while we gloat over the success of our own children? Are we willing to finally address the core issues and begin to ask and answer the tough questions that we have avoided for far too long? Or are we comfortable just doing what we've always done and continue pretending as if we really believe that what we've always done just might work this time? Are we willing to acknowledge that the issues confronting our children, their families, and their communities today did not just arrive with the pandemic? They did not just arrive because of our divisive, dysfunctional politics, or they didn't just arrive because of the opioid crisis, nor did they arrive because of the crack epidemic before that. Are we willing to debunk the myth that the issues confronting our children, their families, and their communities exist only because their parents don't care enough to pull themselves and their children up by their bootstraps, especially when many of them don't even have boots? Indira Gandhi, the former Prime Minister of India, once said, "The power to question is the basis of all human progress." The question before us today is, what will happen to our children if nothing changes? What will happen if we do not act in this moment of opportunity for change? It is the answer to that question that must continue to remind us of the urgent need for ourselves and for our nation as a whole to think differently and to act differently than we have up to this point in time. Finding, implementing, and sustaining solutions to the issues affecting far too many of our children and their families in the communities across this nation will be complicated. It'll be resource intensive, both in terms of human resources and capital resources. And it will be filled with complexities and disagreements about what we should and what we should not do. Any major change is complicated, but that hasn't deterred us in the past. Whenever we have decided that something was a true priority for America or for those with power in America, America as a whole and every individual state has overcome complicated, complex, and resource-intensive challenges many times in the past. Every time we as a nation have decided that something was important enough to get done, we have put forward the political will and the public will to get it done. Our children, their families, and their communities should receive no less of a response from us. We as a nation have to marshal the courage and the will to change the human conditions that we have allowed to exist for some of our children, while at the same time we have fought relentlessly to ensure that those same human conditions did not become part of the daily reality for other children, some of them living in the same city, in the same zip code, in the same school district, and even in some cases in the same school building. There are schools around this country where some children are exposed to life-changing educational opportunities and classes, while other children in the same school building are provided classes that will not give them the same opportunity for success or the same opportunity for prosperity in their adult life. What does a nation tell itself to justify the inherent injustice in this practice? The United States of America has to create the political and public will to take the actions required to ensure that the hope that comes from a globally competitive education and economic opportunity are equally available and within the reach of every child on every street and in every community across this nation. We can no longer be content to accept the challenging human conditions that so many children experience, as long as our children are doing better than those other children who live over there in another neighborhood, another zip code, on the other side of town, in another city, in another state, or even on tribal land. Children deserve better, regardless of where they live. Inequities in our society are the product of our own creation and decision making. And likewise, the reversal of those inequities will have to be the product of our own creation and our own decision making. As a nation, we must commit ourselves to bring about sustainable and equitable change for families who for generations have felt isolated and trapped in living in some of our most challenging communities. This opportunity to achieve change in our communities and for thinking and acting differently than before demands that we begin by having a different conversation. It must be a conversation that provides the roadmap for the change that our nation's children and families and communities need. It must be a conversation that is grounded in the need for transformation in the way that we create possibility for all of our children. And it must be a conversation that creates real, tangible, visible hope for all of our children in their communities. Given this mission, philanthropy, including community philanthropy, is uniquely positioned to be a leader or a catalyst for achieving this change. Although philanthropy must be a key player, philanthropy cannot be the only player in moving the nation towards achieving change. Deep, sustainable, and meaningful change requires the commitment, the will, and the work of all of us, the entire community. This means all 5 sectors that make up a community have to be engaged and part of the decision-making and creation of solutions. The 5 sectors in a community are government. That includes federal, tribal, state, local, and elected officials. The business and corporate entities. The nonprofit sector, civic, grassroots, faith-based, and other community organizations. Philanthropy. And lastly, the general public. Community residents, families, and children must be a part of this conversation. Creating meaningful and sustainable community-based solutions and support networks, determining what that means, what that looks like, or what it takes to make it a reality will require the effort of the entire community. All 5 sectors have to work together, to collaborate, to create the change that we're looking for. This means working with the children and families whose lives we seek to improve and changing the conversation from talking about what we can accomplish for those we serve to what we can accomplish with those we serve. Together, we can design community-driven strategies and solutions that support their needs and dreams for a better life. Intentional efforts must be made to work across the boundaries that define our public, private, philanthropic, charitable, community, and civic response and responsibilities. Stakeholders have to overcome whatever boundaries, whatever walls that insulate them, and what is regarded as their exclusive piece of the pie, their turf, their silo, and we have to work together. The driving philosophy underlying the 5-sector model is one in which all 5 sectors capitalize on their leadership and make the most of their capacity to influence, make the most of their capacity to invest resources and to build the political and public will necessary to improve marginalized communities and the lives of the children and families who live in those communities. The disparities we see in society are not distributed evenly across the United States, but are found in discrete pockets across the country, concentrated in certain neighborhoods, certain communities, certain census tracts, and zip codes. Of the roughly 33,000 residential zip codes in the United States of America. Approximately 20%, or 6,600 zip codes, contain 80% of the nation's children who live in income insufficient households. Additionally, 76% of all of the adults 25 years and older who do not have a high school diploma or GED live in 20% of the nation's zip codes, 6,600 zip codes. There is also a strong correlation between the level of education attainment and income. Many of these zip codes contain both children living in income insufficient households and adults who don't have a high school education. These communities also are more likely to produce a disproportionate number of children in foster care. They're likely to produce a disproportionate number of people in prison, and they're likely to produce a disproportionate number of violent crimes and homicide victims. In his speech about the other America, the America of the have-nots and the left behind, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., speaking at Stanford University in 1967, said, "The greatest tragedy of this other America is what it does to little children. Little children in this other America are forced to grow up with clouds of inferiority forming every day in their little mental skies. And as we look at this other America, we see it as an arena of blasted hopes and shattered dreams. The 5 sectors working together presents us with an opportunity to restore hope. It presents us with an opportunity to mend dreams and to change the future for all of our children. Philanthropy, working with the other 4 sectors, presents us with an opportunity to leverage our investments in a way that can provide children, their families, and their communities with the chance to change the trajectory of their lives for generations to come. This is not necessarily about how much new money we need to find to make this a reality. However, this is definitely about how we collectively begin to invest differently to make the outcomes we want for our children accessible for all children in America. Many see foundations and philanthropy primarily as a source of funding, but that doesn't have to be philanthropy's sole contribution. Foundations are more than money. Foundations have a much more expansive and complete role to play. Although funding is necessary, foundations must bring more than money to the table. Foundations leveraging their dollars with the efforts and the dollars from other sectors to implement promising and proven programs and services is vital. But foundation dollars alone are incapable of going the distance required to get the nation where it needs to be. For example, the annual giving of all foundations cannot compare or compete with the government's annual spending. The annual giving from foundations can only complement, leverage, and enhance government spending. Giving USA 2021 reported that the total giving from all foundations in the United States in 2020 amounted to a record high of approximately $89 billion. Comparatively, federal, state, and local revenues for public schools alone in 2019 were approximately $752 billion. $58 billion in federal funds, $351 billion in state funds, and $343 billion in local funds. Relatively speaking, philanthropy's record amount of $89 billion in charitable giving toward numerous causes and needs in this country doesn't even come close to government's capacity to invest in just one area of need: education. In this moment of profound opportunity and for change, philanthropy has to do more. It has to be more than its money. We must work with all sectors to bring about the change our children need. When Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. asked in 1967, where do we go from here? Chaos or community? He believed that we had the resources and technology to eradicate income insufficiency. All we needed, he believed, was the will to do it. The will to form a united social movement to fight poverty and to create an equality of opportunity. In a nation of immense resources, building public and political will and human capacity are the central issues. We have the capacity to change things, but oftentimes organizations and agencies lack the will to realign their capacity in response to the need. Organizations across the 5 sectors have to exercise bold leadership and use their influence to move our collective capacity towards a common goal of stronger families and stronger communities, more supportive communities. If we are to create a better America, we must leverage the opportunity that the concept of community philanthropy and a true 5-sector collaboration provides us to engage in collective community-driven effort that helps communities create a pathway to hope for children and families across this entire nation, from sea to sea, from border to border. All 5 sectors in communities must cooperate to engage in an unrelenting pursuit to improve the life outcomes of all children in all communities, in all zip codes. It is customary for the Maasai of East Africa to greet each other each morning with the words, Kasarian Injera, or translated, how are the children? The response to this greeting is Sapati Injera, which is an aspiration and a declaration, and it means all the children are well. How would we answer this question today in the United States of America? If, as Indira Gandhi suggests, the power to question lies at the basis of all human progress, then I am compelled to ask this question. How are America's children? What will happen to them if nothing changes? And how will we ever reach that place of Sapati Injera? How will we ever reach that place in the United States of America, the richest country in the world, the most generous country in the world, throughout history? How will we reach that place when all of America's children are well? Thank you, and God bless you. And may God cause us to change the future for all children in America, in every town, in every city, in every tribe, in every community, every neighborhood, and every nation. Thank you.